Meeting House on this site. It was the first one was an old tobacco barn, and when that burned down, so they say maybe it was an accident, maybe not. They built a wood frame house, which served as a meeting house for about 10 or 12 years, and then they decided to build this edifice. This was completed in 1817. When it was finished, there was a wood partition in the middle.
Okay.
It could be raised or lowered if they wanted to use the whole space, but the partition was there because men would worship on the north side of the meeting house, women would worship on the south side of the meeting house.
Okay, so the men worshipped over
The
here.
reason being they didn't want to make the women feel that they were subservient to the men, and also we distract each other. We distract each other
Interesting.
about that. So when they wanted the whole space, they could raise the curtain if they wanted to. Now in 1968, Sandy Spring Friends School had just been founded, excuse me, and they decided that they needed a bigger space for graduation ceremonies and things like that. So let's put a balcony in the meeting house. It was not built immediately with a balcony. So the balcony was completed in 1968.
Oh,
Question
wow.
became, if we put a balcony in, what are we going to do about the big wood partition? That's historic, and we want to make sure that we honor the history of it. So a gentleman, a friend of in the meeting named Brooke Moore, who was a cabinet maker by trade, he came to the meeting and said he had a vision of the partition coming apart and becoming the balcony. So the facing panels on the balcony are the panels that came out of the partition.
Oh, wow.
The extra panels are now in the Sandy Spring Museum, and they use them to divide up the exhibits.
Interesting.
Now, when they started the engineering and architectural planning for the balcony, they discovered that the building had been intended to have a balcony all along. There were notches in the wall, there were reinforced areas under the floor, and building the balcony became a natural addition to the building.
Wow, that's amazing. It's interesting how the last bench has room for the windows. Like
The whole, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it just had to be made that way because the
Okay.
windows were there, and in designing, the height and everything, it just worked out that way.
Yes. Wow.
In another design, maybe the benches would have had a lower in October, and the building hasn't shifted, it hasn't cracked, the windows still run true.
Wow.
Nothing's been added or subtracted from it, except for the triple track aluminum storm windows, I guess. And the privy on the corner has been made into a flush bathroom, so we have modern
okay.
accompaniments, baseboard electric heat. There was a big coal-fired furnace in the basement, but that's been eliminated, obviously.
Why do some benches have this hard back and some are open with
Well, we
those?
would not call that a hard back, it's
Oh,
padded.
okay. Well, padded back. Well, it has a back, and then
Originally, the benches
and
are
then
the
those
same
are.
vintage. They were made by Malin Chanley, the same man who made the millwork for the windows and everything, and doors. And so originally, they did not have any padding at all.
Oh,
And before the padding was added, I noted to my own satisfaction that the proportions were such that they just fit. The padding lifts you up a little bit, and my wife unfortunately doesn't like them because she's a little shorter than I am. Right?
okay.
But there was a lot of discussion, a lot of back and forth. Quakers act very glacially about putting padding on the seats. So it was decided, well, we'll put the pads on the seats, but we'll leave some of the backs open for personal preference, some of the backs with padding. Just to
Oh,
give people a chance to decide. And some have, this back support, and some don't. The balcony seats do not have any padding.
oh, the balcony seats
It's
don't
just a
have
matter
padding.
of preference.
Okay. Interesting. And
We
so for
are-
200 years, this
Yes.
building. Wow.
We have records going back to 1753, which we like to think makes us the oldest continuous congregation in Montgomery County.
Wow.
If not the oldest, we're certainly one of. Sandy Spring was settled Quakers first started moving here in the 1730s and 40s. They came from what is now Anne Arundel County, from southern Maryland, from Virginia. Indian Spring Meeting was in Anne Arundel County in what is now the Patuxent Wildlife Refuge. Used to be Fort Meade. The foundation of the old Indian Spring Meeting House, unfortunately, was used for target practice during World War I.
Oh.
Because Fort Meade absorbed all that land.
Yes.
There's a real history there too. So the Friends moved here for several reasons. One, because the land in Anne Arundel County had been worn out, growing tobacco and cotton and such. So they needed new ground. The land around here was not inhabited by Native Americans. They certainly passed through, but there were no tribes living here. So it made it easy for the Friends to say, okay, we don't have to deal with any Native American ownership issues like William Penn did.
That's interesting.
You'll give me a copy of this video, won't you?
Yes, I will. Of course. Absolutely.
Good. We are a traditional Friends meeting. We have no pastor, no paid minister, no priest. We sit quietly in worship, inviting God to speak to us and inspire us to minister to each other. So we might have a whole hour of silence. We might have a dozen messages or 2 or 3. It's not up to us.
Oh, that's interesting. And so, where did the Quaker religion originate?
1650 or so in England. A fellow named
England.
George Fox had the revelation that you did not need a human intercessor to know God. His word is that Christ had come to teach his people himself. The King James Bible had only been written and published not 30 years before, 40 years before. So any literate English person, I almost said American, any literate English person could read the Bible for themselves.
Okay.
And that became very important. You did not need a priest to read it and interpret it to you. One of the reasons for the founding of the Religious Society of Friends was the fact that people started to see a lot of hypocrisy between what Christ said in the Bible versus what the priests and ministers did or said. So there you are.
Okay, that makes sense.
So look up George Fox in your encyclopedia or online, and you can find a lot to that. We've got some Quaker propaganda here you can take with you. We'll answer some questions for you and raise some more.
Okay.
And like that.
Okay.
Where are you from?
Originally from Chicago.
Okay.
I've been to the Quaker House in Philly. Oh, okay. Do you have questions
Arch
for
Street.
James?
Arch Street.
Arch Street? Is that where you went?
The Arch Street meeting?
Arch Street meeting? Did you go to the Arch Street meeting? Yes. Yes, they said. Yes.
So there's a larger group of people involved here.
Yes, there are a lot of, there, it says 30-something people around here. I don't
Oh my
know.
goodness.
14 people. I can't see. I don't have my glasses.
And where
Okay,
are they
so
from?
14. Where are you guys from? What part of the world are you from?
Where are they hailing from?
Yes. So he has questions for you if you don't have questions for him.
I want to know who I'm talking
James.
to.
Yes, James wants to know who he's talking to. Say hi and where you're from. What part of the world are you from? Who went to Philly, to the meeting house in Philly? Is that Angel? I know earlier this morning I broadcasted I had people from England, Sweden, Finland, as well as the United States. So this is Periscope. It's called an app called Periscope. I'll turn it around and show it to you.
Okay.
It's like having your own, yes, so it's like,
Okay.
yeah, so it's like
There
having
I
your,
am.
yeah, there you are. So it's like having your own TV show,
Okay.
and it's called live streaming, so you can broadcast and talk to people around the world. So when you turn it on, it connects to Twitter. Please talk more about the Quaker and their...
And the Freemason connection. There is none that I know of. The Masons are a totally separate organization. I have no idea if there's any Quaker connection. I would not think there is any.
Okay. Well, that's a good question. Okay. So
I'm sure they're talking about the Masonic order thing. I mean, the building was made by a Mason. He laid the bricks.
Oh, okay. Yeah. No. Yeah, I'm sure they're not talking about.
The Scottish Rite Masonic order.
I think that's what they're talking about.
There's no connection that I know of.
Yeah.
Would be none.
So, what is the role in the community? So let me. Okay, the free community that was here, the free black community.
Oh,
that developed in Sandy Spring.
Sure. A lot of the Quakers of the area did own slaves in the early 1700s. And in 1776-77, the yearly meeting, which is the greater organization, Baltimore Yearly Meeting, came to agreement that slavery was against God's goodwill. And so if you wanted to stay a friend in good standing, you needed to either free your enslaved people or make arrangements for their freedom in good order. It was sufficient to make plans and indicate how you would do it. It was recognized that you couldn't just say you're free, goodbye, go away. You had a responsibility to these people. So very often they were given land, they were trained in a trade to make sure they could support themselves. Very often it was the landowner's will would dictate how his enslaved people would be given their freedom. So, for instance, if a male reached the age of 21, he would be free. If a woman had children, as soon as they were all free, the woman would be freed. It was an orderly thing like that. It was not expected that we should, as I said, just say goodbye, you're free, go away. For instance, if you go out the driveway and turn left, you'll come to the Sharp Street United Methodist Church, which is a predominantly black church in the community. When the friends of this meeting started freeing their enslaved people, it was recognized that they probably did not want to worship with their ex-masters. So friends got together, donated land, and helped them establish their own church, the Sharp Street United Methodist Church.
Oh, wow.
Interesting thing about that is that there is no Sharp Street anywhere in Montgomery County. How did it get its name? Well, back then in 1820s, 1830s, it was illegal for a group of black folks to own property without white supervision. So in order to get around that, the property was owned, the title was held by a church in Baltimore, the Sharp Street Church in Baltimore.
Oh, really?
So they held title to the property until the black folks could get their act together and do it appropriately. Okay.
And so the Sharp Street Church in Baltimore was a white church?
Yes.
Okay. That's interesting.
Yep,
That's an amazing story. Yeah, that's fascinating.
Yep.
That's fascinating.
So there are a lot of black churches in America that have some history with the Quaker Meeting of the area. The AMEZ churches or AME churches.
Yes.
Very often they have a Quaker connection that they may not even be aware of back in their history. Just an interesting thing.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. Absolutely. And go ahead.
You were going to ask something.
I was going to ask you about the cemetery.
Well, the graveyard has been there as long as the meeting has. The original graves are unmarked because the original Quakers thought that headstones were vain displays and not worthy of a good Christian burial.
Oh, wow.
So that attitude kind of changed further on, you can see.
Yes.
Yep.
Wow. And what else were you going to share with us before I stopped you?
Well, the original Friends were very, very biblically oriented, which friends today might not agree with, but you can't avoid it. Most of our testimonies and principles are biblically based. You can go back to pacifism, equality of the genders, a lot of things like that. The graveyard, for instance, they're wanting to do honor to God rather than themselves by putting up a headstone or not putting up a headstone. All that kind of thing was very biblically based originally.
So how do you learn the teachings if when you come, people are silent or they
Yes.
speak or they
Yes.
don't speak? Then how do you learn
Osmosis.
osmosis?
Osmosis. You come and you've got to just be here.
Yes.
You come, you worship with us, get on a committee, talk to people. We'll have classes for friends that are visiting, Quaker 101, if you will.
Okay.
One of the things we try to teach is if you come to worship, you come willing to speak but not prepared to speak. Any message should be spirit-led rather than ego-led or from some other. You don't want to sit down and read the newspaper. It's not appropriate.
Right. That's very interesting. Wow.
So we've been here a long time, and we intend to be here quite a little bit further. It's not unusual for folks to come up and say, "I thought you were all dead. How come you don't wear a big broad brim hat?" We're not the Amish. We're Quakers.
Yes.
But the traditional peace churches, the Mennonites, the Hutterites, the Brethren, the Quakers, those are the 5 traditional peace churches. And we hold a lot of things in common. We do. Questions about the history, about the area? What can we do for you?
Yes. Would like to know more about why is it Sandy Spring? Is there a Sandy Spring?
Come on in. Yes, there is. If you walk down this road about another quarter mile, you will come to the actual real Sandy Spring that this area was named after.
Okay.
We have a map we can give you. Good morning. Welcome to Sandy Spring.
Thank you.
Would you like the 50-cent tour or the dollar tour? Just talk. Well, this is the 3rd meeting house on the site. The first one was an old tobacco barn, they said. And that burned down maybe on purpose, maybe in an accident. We're not sure. Records don't indicate that. Tradition says it was an accident, but because you're in a tobacco barn, maybe not. So they built a wood frame meeting house, and that's served for about 10 or 12 years, and then they decided to build this edifice. This was completed in 1817. Originally, it had a wood partition in the middle, whereby they could divide the meeting house in half so that the men could worship on one end, on the north end, and the women could worship on the south end. The reason being that we tend to distract each other. And we don't want the women to feel subservient to the men. Gender equality was very important back then. They might not have called it that, but that's what it was. Come on in, folks. Don't be shy. So here's this big wooden curtain. It could be raised and lowered. Originally, the meeting house did not have a balcony in it. In 1968, the Friends Meeting had already founded Sandy Spring Friends School a couple of years before. And they decided they needed extra space for graduation ceremonies, things like that. Let's put a balcony in the meeting house. Well, when they started doing the engineering drawings for it, they discovered that the meeting house had been designed to have a balcony all along. There were notches in the walls, there were reinforced areas under the floorboards. Nobody knew about it until they started looking at it. So the question became, what do we do about this historic curtain in the middle? Do we want to do right by people? And a gentleman named Brooke Moore, who was a cabinet maker by trade, came to a meeting and said he had a vision. And the vision had been of the dividing curtain coming apart and becoming the balcony. So these facing panels on the balcony are the panels that came out of the wood curtain from the middle of the meeting house. The extra panels that were left over are now over in Sandy Spring Museum. They're used to divide the different exhibits. For you new folks, we are a traditional Friends meeting. We have no paid pastor, no minister, no priest to lead us. We sit silently waiting for the Lord to inspire us to minister to each other. So we might have an hour of silence, we might have a dozen messages, we might have 2 or 3 messages. It depends. We don't intend anything when you come here. Where are you folks from?
Montgomery County.
Good. Okay. We've had people from Florida here today. How about that?
That's great.
We have records going back to 1753, which leads us to believe we are the oldest continuous congregation in Montgomery County. If not the oldest, then we're certainly one of the oldest.
So is there a literature?
There's no literature. The history of Friends starts about 1650 in England with a fellow named George Fox. And his revelation was that you did not need a human intercessor between you and God. His first teaching was that Christ had come to teach his people himself. The King James Bible had just been published in vernacular English about 25 or 30 years before. And so any literate person could read the Bible for themselves then. You didn't need a priest to read it and interpret it to you. So the folks back then, this is the Protestant Reformation time. The folks back then started thinking, well, the Bible tells us this, but the priest is doing that. What's going on? So that's what led to all the back and forth and problems. And here we are. I like to tell folks that we're not having this conversation except for two people. One is Jesus Christ, 2,000 years ago, and the other is George Fox, 300 years ago. Without those two folks, I wouldn't be here and you wouldn't be talking to me.
There's a certain similarity in the Quaker Meeting House.
He mentioned the name Shakers. The Shakers, we're not Shakers. We're not Amish. We're not Anabaptists. We're not the Mennonites. The Mennonites are good people, all good people, but they have priests. The Brethren are all good people. They have elders. The Hutterites are good people. They're more of a communist society, believe it or not. Look them up. Hutterites, good people. I'm going to visit them in Canada sometime. Anyway, so there we are. This is the Religious Society of Friends. The term friends comes from a biblical verse, John 15:15, where Christ says that he will not call you servants anymore, but he will call you friends because he's told you everything that the Father has told him. The term Quaker comes from an insult. George Fox was brought up before a trial magistrate named Barrett. And Magistrate Barrett, Fox's charge was that he didn't tip his hat to the social betters. The sheriff, the mayor, the lord of the manor. You're supposed to tip your hat if somebody is better than you or richer or something like that. To the Quakers, everybody was equal before God's eyes, and there's no need to tip your hat to anybody. But if you didn't, you could be dragged before the judge. And the argument was, there's no law saying that you have to tip my hat to anybody. Yeah, but you were supposed to. So Fox's retort to the judge was, even thee must tremble and quake before the word of the Lord. And Magistrate Barrett reported to have said, I guess that makes you a Quaker then, doesn't it? Ha ha. And the name stuck. So I remember this because my grandparents' name was Barrett. Somewhere there's a connection someplace back there. So Quaker or friend, we accept either one.
Did Quakers fight in the Civil War?
Some did. In the Revolutionary War, if you go up to Philadelphia, you will find 3 meeting houses. One's on Cherry Street, one's on Arch Street, and there's another one on 3rd or 4th Avenue, I forget. The one on 3rd or 4th Avenue is called the Free Quaker Meeting House. Those are the friends that split off from the traditional friends and were in favor of the Revolutionary War and fighting and serving in the army, etc. Betsy Ross was a Free Quaker. Benjamin Franklin was a member of the Free Quaker Meeting House. After the Revolutionary War was settled, that meeting just kind of went away. First there were no more members. And in 50 years, there was no more meeting. The house is still there. It's history. It's National Park Service, but the members aren't. Arch Street Meeting House makes this thing look like a summer cottage. It is huge. They could probably seat 3,000 people in it. It's a huge, huge meeting house. Very old, too.
Was there a similar split in the Civil War?
Oh, yeah. There were people that served in the Civil War and were read out of meeting for their trouble. If they came back and admitted their guilt and their error, they could be accepted back into the fold. There were members. If you read our little red history book out there, take one of those with you. There's a chapter all about the Civil War and how members of this meeting, Confederate Colonel Bowie came through town with a cavalry unit. They attacked the general store up here and stripped it of supplies and took some horses and tied up the people And the people, when they got loose, they said, "Ugh," and they got up and chased after him. And there was a little bit of a battle. The people that went to that trouble were read out of meeting. No, they weren't read out of meeting, but they were eldered severely, according to the book.
What does that mean?
You have done something wrong. Sit down and we're going to talk to you. Yes.
So there is an authority. There are authorities.
Not so much anymore. Not so much anymore. In the old days, these raised benches here, these would be called the front benches, or the back benches, front benches. The elders of the meeting, the recorded ministers, would be seating there in some place of honor, if you will. We don't hold to that anymore. There are no more recorded ministers in the Baltimore Yearly Meeting. We have our leadership is called clerks. I'm a clerk of a committee. Everything here is done by volunteer. We do pay, for professionals coming to do things, but most everything is overseen by a volunteer like me. Clerk of the meeting is a position that rotates every 3 years. I may end up being clerk of the meeting, but I'm not going to look forward to it. It's more of a lightning rod than it is of a ecclesiastical leadership position.
So there's none of the social, the rules like the Calvinists had.
No.
Kind of conformity.
Well,
Quaker groups.
we do have a book that's called Faith and Practice that Baltimore Yearly Meeting came an agreement to. It changes. It adjusts with the times. The 1928 Faith and Practice certainly is not the same as the 2014 Faith and Practice. But it involves history, it involves tradition, it involves suggestions and guidelines as to what should be done. But no one Quaker would ever tell another Quaker, you're believing wrong. But if you're at all interested in the local history, that little red book out there is an excellent start for you. Questions, comments? I forget where I left off.
So you said, but you said, okay, so no Quaker would tell another Quaker you're believing wrong.
Yeah.
But then how did they, during those who held slaves, enslaved people, didn't they believe something different?
There you go. That's the difficult part. Because you can use the Bible to prove that slavery is a good thing, a normal thing. You really can. But to insist that, no, it's wrong to own another human being. Mm-hmm. Until you grow up, your parents own you. Right? Yeah. Until you grow up, your parents own you, right? You do what they tell you to do. Right? Do you get paid for it? Yeah, okay, so slavery? I don't know.
That's not slavery.
My son's 23 years old. He works for a local farmer. He's a farm manager. We're quite proud of him for the way he's developed. But he used to say, wait a minute, you're giving me an allowance, but everything I do around here isn't worth that allowance. I said, yeah, but you've got a roof over your head, you got insurance, you got to go to the doctor, da-da-da-da-da-da. So it all balances out. And eventually he's going to be carrying me around, right?
Yes, that's true.
So there you are.
It does reverse, but that's not the same as an enslaved person.
It's not the same thing.
No.
No.
I don't know.
No. So,
As a group, did the Quakers support the Underground Railroad? That there is that
as a group,
sort of general impression.
As a group, no. I mean, there was no official stance by any Quaker group that I know of that said, we're in favor of the Underground Railroad. But individuals, yes, and the meetings would support the individuals. Levi Coffin in Indiana and Ohio is a classic example of that. Everybody knew Levi Coffin was a station master on the Underground Railroad, and his meeting supported him a lot. But for the meeting house itself to be a hiding place, probably not. The legalities involved and the risk involved, they probably wouldn't go that far. But individuals, yes.
Did this congregation individually or as a group?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I went to
So-
Sherwood High School and I grew up in the area. And I would go to play with my friends at their houses. I didn't have a historic house when I grew up. I just had a house. But they had houses. There was one boy I remember, he had a stairway in his wall up to the attic.
In his wall.
Yeah.
Wow.
Open up this panel in the wall, there's a stairway up to the attic. How cool is that for a 5 or 6 year old, right? And there's another boy's house I remember had a tunnel from the basement out to an ice house. And when I was 6, 7 years old, the tunnel was big enough still for me to walk in, walking, not crawling, but walking. Why do you need a tunnel? It doesn't get that deep snow ground here. But there it was. And as I grew up, I realized, wait a minute, they were there for a reason. There are lots of stories around here. It's all oral history. Nothing was written down. Couldn't be written down because that would be proof of your complicity in helping these slaves escape, which was against the law. It was against the law. So you could have your property taken away from you. You could be thrown in jail. The Bentley family, Sandy Spring Museum over here is on property that was owned by the Bentley family, Bentley Road. The story recorded is that Mr. Bentley was in his house one evening reading by candlelight or lamplight. And there was a knock on the door, and a black man was there at the door when he went to answer it. And the black man was recognized by Mr. Bentley as being a slave from the local plantation. And the black man says, Master Bentley, could you show me the North Star? And Bentley went out on his porch and pointed out the North Star, and the black man said, thank you, Mr. Bentley, and he was never seen in the area again. That's family history. And you record that by the granddaughter talking about it in a lecture series. It's not written down in anybody's diary. It's just somebody telling somebody else, somebody telling us, telling us. That's the kind of history we've got. Kids walk around the meeting house and they see the door in the back and they say, oh, that's the hidey hole where the slaves hid. No, that's where the coal-fired furnace was installed in 1928. So there's that kind of history here.
Is there a local person comparable to Eli? You said Coffin?
Levi.
Levi Coffin.
No.
No?
Not in this community that I can speak to. No. The Garrettsons, not Garrettson, Garrett in Delaware, and he was a Quaker. And I've got names, but I can't think of them all right now. A lot of them are mentioned in a little red book. That's all I can tell you. If you want some more history, go around Norwood Road to Woodlawn Manor. The museum is open there until 4 or 5 o'clock, and I highly recommend that. The museum is a nice place, interactive, exhibits, lots of information, and only 4 mistakes. I'll let you find them.
4 mistakes.
They wouldn't be of importance to anybody except somebody like me.
Oh.
About the Quakers?
About the Quakers. Yep. They unfortunately built and developed the museum without talking to anybody in this meeting. They talked to a lot of scholars around the country, did very good work. It's all very accurate except for these 4 little nitpicking things that I would point to if I had to. All I need is a piece of duct tape to cover it up, but no, I don't want to do that.
Oh, no.
Anyway, but it's a neat place. It's very well done. Designed by a member of our meeting. Mish Bose. Recommend him too if you need an architect. Again, for you newcoming folks, this is the 3rd meeting house on the site. It was completed in 1817.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Oh, my card. I want to copy that video.
Oh, yes, I do want your card. I'm so sorry. Oh, excuse me.
I'm a Boy Scout leader, so that's my address.
Okay,
Email
thank
and
you.
everything.
Okay, I will do that.
Sure.
Thank you so much, James. Oh, excuse me. Hi, how are you? Good. Okay, so I'm going to show you guys outside. So this is the plaque, 1753, the first Sandy Springs meeting of record of the Religious Society of Friends held in this grove, 1817, present building of record, 1953.
That was the first one.
So that was the first one.
First building, yeah.
First building.
And
That was
this-
the tobacco barn that burned down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
this is now 200 years old.
This.
Yeah.
Okay. So
Present building was around.
this present building is 200 years old.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
That's nice.
Yes. Yes, it is.
Where are you from?
Chicago originally, but I now live in Maryland,
Oh, where do you live?
in Rockville.
Oh, okay, good.
Yes.
My son is in Chicago.
Oh, really?
My daughter-in-law, yeah.
Oh,
They live
fantastic.
near Irving Park.
Evergreen Park? Yeah.
Irving.
Irving Park. Irving Park is north. I
North,
think.
yeah.
Yes,
It is
yes. That's
Yeah.
north.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That is north. So, did you want to be on? You want to say hi to the lovely people? What is your name?
My name is Loy Jones.
Loy. Spell it.
L-O-Y.
L-O-Y.
I tell people sometimes, if they're old enough, remember Myrna Loy.
Oh, yes, I've heard of Myrna Loy. Yes, yes.
Although my name doesn't come from that.
Okay.
It comes from Lloydell.
Lloydell.
Lloydell. Uh-huh.
Okay, Lloydell. Fantastic, fantastic.
Really? And what is your name again?
My name is Janice.
Janice. Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
I don't have any hands anymore.
Yeah.
So I want to show people
Uh-huh.
the outside,
Okay.
because when I went in, I started filming immediately. Historic Site, Montgomery County Master Plan for Historic Preservation. And to those attending our meetings for worship, go in as soon as you are ready. It is a good thing if the meeting can settle down a few minutes before the appointed time. The meeting begins when the first worshiper takes his place and lifts his heart to God. It continues until the elders shake hand in a token of conclusion. Responsibility for the right of holding a meeting is shared by us all. Ask humbly that you may be guided to take your part in the ministry of silence. Do not be anxious about distracting thoughts, but ride through them to the still center. And try, if only for an instant, to let yourself be quiet in body, mind, and soul. We are very glad to see you. Meetings for worship.
In the connection
And
between
then the
school
history
and
is on this side over here. And then I want to show you guys.
is it a quick? Is it the Quaker
Chronicles of the
school, friends
Sandy
school?
Spring Friends meeting and surroundings.
Just curious whether
I want to show you guys.
what the curriculum.
I'm going to show you guys the outside of the, yeah, I'm going to show them the outside of the building. That's what I'm trying to do. So this is the 200, I'm trying to get back here, the 200-year-old Quaker Meeting House structure right here. And so it's a beautiful building. And then there's the cemetery there. And then down this way is, I don't know, there's a fork in the road. One of these roads leads to the actual Sandy Spring. And so I want to read this over here to you guys. Now, history of the Sandy Spring Friends Meeting House, 1753. Sandy Spring Friends Meeting House, established on this side by 3 or 4 families who had moved here from the first meetings on the western shore of Chesapeake Bay. 1770, James Brooke conveyed 1 acre of this land to his sons to be held in trust for the use of the Quakers, a frame meeting house, probably second on the site, and 5 burial places were already on this land. Present site is about 9 acres. 1817, the present meeting house, built by local labor and contributions of friends and neighbors. Doors at each end permitted the traditional separate entrances and meetings of men and women. So that door is the men's door. This is the women's door. Panel dividing partitions could be raised in the middle. Separate meetings were abandoned about 1890. That was pretty early. Lyceum built 1858, became community house in 1927. 1868, the porch was added. 1938, electricity installed, followed over the years by oil heat, wall-to-wall carpeting, and foam and rubber cushions. 1968, the balcony added used old partition panels as facing. 1972, Meeting House declared National Historic Site. So it's a National Historic Site. And then here it says, walk cheerfully over the world, answering the